Hello, everyone. Welcome again to Hour of Healing. This is another week for us to discuss a thought provoking topic. Welcome. I hope your week has been great. Our week has been great. I'm here with Dr. Joe. Of course, I am your host, Candace, and I'm here with Dr. Joe Deborah. I'm going to welcome him in. And today's topic, you will not believe it, but you have to wait to see where today's discussion goes. So, Dr. Joe, welcome again.
Thank you, Sister Candice. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Today's topic is going to be big problems, simple fixes. I don't like to waste time. So, a big problem, simple fixes. As usual, we want to know the background, what influence, what is the motive behind this topic. Big problems, simple fixes.
Yes, thank you for that question, Sister Candice. And the background to this topic, obviously, most of our topics are gotten in the place of prayer, hence thoughts, medication through our fellowship with the Spirit. And so this topic is one of those topics that actually is derived from a biblical principle. You know, when you read the book of Matthew chapter 11, I believe verse 12, it says that from the days of John the Baptist until now, that the kingdom of God has suffered violence, and the violent takes it by force. And obviously, as I have grown through my Christian life, I've heard this preached in many, many ways, shapes, forms. I've heard many preachers and many Christians even use this to justify their acts of violence and their intensity when it comes to the things of God and things like that. So I sat down, and as I was meditating, this scripture came to mind. And I said that if the kingdom of God has been suffering violence, and it takes violence to reclaim that kingdom, then that's a big problem.
Mhm.
So I started kind of working my thought through
Okay.
this. And then I was directed to Second Kings, I believe it's chapter 19, where a kingdom called the Assyrian kingdom at that time had come and made a lot of threats to the people of Judah. At that time, the king who was in power was Hezekiah. Most Christian listeners will know Hezekiah as the king who prayed for God to increase his years, and he did. So this happened during this king's reign, that
Mhm.
the Assyrian government came and made a lot of threats to him.
Mhm.
And again, I said to myself, this is a big problem. But the good thing is, I was able to find a solution to this threat that came against the kingship of Hezekiah. And all he had to do was to seek the services of a prophet of God. And I said to myself, that's a very simple solution. They did not even have to fight.
Right.
Friends, why am I taking the time to take you through this journey about this topic and things like that? I'm doing this so that you understand that in this life,
Mhm.
we are always going to face challenges. And
Right.
by the grace of God, as we talk through some challenges today, whether it be spiritual, physical, emotional, mental, as we talk through these, I hope and pray that God will give us the grace to communicate the simplicity of how we can go about obtaining solutions to the various challenges that we face in life on a
Mhm.
daily basis. And so that is really where what we are doing today, helping our audience heal through various challenges. Some we would spend time going into because of the delicateness of those matters, depending
Right.
on what questions come forth. But others we will go straight to the point and just be able to move on from there. But
Mhm.
that is truly where we are going today, and really the background for this topic today.
Wow, that's a very powerful analysis that you have made out of, a story that happened. Because I think sometimes when you read in scriptures like that, or when a story is presented to you, we tend to think of the bigger problem, or the like actually what is going on. But it's very interesting because it's a few people who think to find solutions to
Mm,
issues.
Mm.
I don't want to say a lot of people, but some people, when they think around trouble or problems and trials and tribulations, they don't think to find solution. When people are
Mm.
arguing, they're not thinking to argue for solution.
True.
So I
True.
think it's very powerful, and it's a trait to learn in our daily lives, in any problem, any situation. What is the solution? And
Mm.
sometimes solutions may be quitting. Solution may be walking away. So it doesn't the solution doesn't necessarily have to be something that pleases you, or you like, or something like that. So
Absolutely.
that's very powerful. But what problems? Because somebody's listening and they're like, you have no idea what I'm going through, you know. You don't know what marriage is about. You probably have a peaceful marriage, so you don't know what some marriages can do to people. That's a huge problem. So, can we signify what problems we are addressing? I think you mentioned some relationship finance, but can we go in depth? Problems that can arise in marriage that can be detrimental to people that we can find small fixes for.
Yeah, absolutely. And so rather than just focus on marriage by itself, I would take relationships as a whole.
Right.
When you take family dynamics, for instance, in every family, there is a troublemaker. And
Yeah.
so the problem here that we will find in this particular family will be the problem of a troublemaker. And you may say that, oh, I don't have any troublemakers in my family, but believe you me, you do have one.
Mm,
Troublemakers in family, Sister Candace, can be people who do things that brings dishonor to the family. And so it's not that they are fighting everybody in the family, but let's say they sleeping around. That brings dishonor to the family. It could be someone in the family who is lazy. They
mm,
don't want to pull their own weight. Why
mm,
is this a problem? It's a problem because sooner or later, that little problem will become a bigger problem of dependency. It
mm,
will lead to someone who, at the age of, let's say, 40 or 45, as we talked about in Number Your Days, where
mm,
they should be building a legacy, they should be contributing meaningfully to the family and to society. They become dependent on their younger sibling. And so
right.
this is a big problem.
Yeah.
When we take relationships, it could be a problem of communication or the lack thereof, I should say. That we
Mm,
all have been in situations where we have that family member, that sibling who would not allow anybody else to talk. They,
mm.
they will tell you that I am the thumb, that without me, the family will not function,
Right,
that
right.
everything in this family revolves around me. And
Okay.
so these are all problems that we face in families.
Well,
So,
and I think I agree with what you're saying. And another thing that I'm thinking about too, when we speak about, in every family, there's always one person, or there's always somebody. I'm thinking about just the general well-being of the family. They probably don't have to be doing the most craziest things, but it's
mhm,
always one person who causes something like emotional
correct.
stir up for the family, or mental stir up for the family. So, they don't probably have to be going out all night and you're like, where are you? Where are you? That kind of, but it's just anything that makes the entire family's well being like a bit stressful. That person can be put in this category, because I know you guys
Absolutely.
have great families out there, but me and Dr. Joe are talking about our personal family. Our own family have those, but we want to help you to identify so we can heal one another. All right. So
Okay.
I will hand it back to Dr. Joe. We've said relationship. What other problems that we may face?
Yeah, some of the other problems, and I know we have a series, God willing, later this year about wealth. But let's, for today, for the purposes of our discussion, limit ourselves to finances. How
Mm.
many people don't have financial problems?
Sure.
And I mean, before you say that I don't have financial problem, the question I will pose to you is this: do you have money enough to give without any worry? And we're not talking about giving 100. If you are able to give, finance projects without fear of you hurting financially, then you can turn this off when we get to the financial part and say, I don't need to hear any of that part. But financial problems are big problems. How
Right.
about housing problems? That can be put under financial problems as well,
Mhm.
or safety problems. There are there are places in our communities that are not safe. People would not want to do business in those areas. People do not want to invest in those areas. People cannot walk in those areas. Even in the Bible time, they had places like that. When we talk about the road from Jericho to Jerusalem, where we have the famous Good Samaritan story. And so there are safety issues. What about safety of your children when they go to school?
Mm,
The things they are being taught, are they
mhm.
things that you are rest assured? These are all, Sister Candace, some problems. I know we can come up with as many problems as we want.
Right, right,
We can also talk about problems of emotional state. So
right.
anxiety, depression, mental
Yeah,
imbalances, and
yeah.
things of that nature.
Mental health.
Fear is one of the big problems that I hope we are able to get to today. So these are all problems. And then maybe I will add one more. I will talk about the problem of ego
Mm.
or pride. We've talked about pride from various aspects, and it keeps coming up because it's
It's
one
a
of the
big issue.
biggest
Mhm.
challenges or issues of our generation.
Yeah.
That we don't have a lot of substance, but we go about thinking or acting as though we have a lot of substance. And
Mhm.
then what about problems of identity?
Right.
We impersonate others. We impersonate things that we don't have. We impersonate status that we don't have, and
Mhm.
things of that nature. So these are some of the few problems that I can list for our audience, and some of these things we will be talking about today, and see where God leads us.
So, Dr. Job, we're going to get right into the fixes, viewers. We're just going to dive right in. But before we get into it, I have this mindset, I have this thought in about the simple fix. So, I would rather you define it, because what do we mean by simple fix? Like, what do you mean? Does it mean like I have financial problem, go get a loan? Is that
Mm.
a simple fix? Like, what do you mean simple fixes? Can we define that?
Yes, that's a very powerful question, Sister Candice. And I'm glad you asked, because when we talk about simple fixes, actually, the definition of simple fixes is not in those two words themselves.
Mm,
I call the potential solutions to most of our problems
mhm,
simple fixes, because it's an act, it's a state that we have to be in. So when
mm,
I talk about simple fixes, I'm talking about getting into that state. So let
mm,
me define that state, right? A series of things have to happen in
mm.
order for us to obtain these solutions
Okay.
to the problems that we have.
Right.
Simple fixes first start with your acknowledgement that there is a problem. That is the
Mm,
first step in simple fixes.
okay.
You have to acknowledge that
Mm,
there is a problem. You
mm.
can say it's not a big problem. Well, then it's not something you have to worry about. So,
Right.
as long as it's something that you have to worry about, it must start with you acknowledging that is a problem. The
Right.
second step in simple fixes is you realizing that you will need help in fixing the problem, that
Okay.
the solution is not in yourself. If it was in yourself,
You
that
couldn't
situation wouldn't have
wouldn't
become
have
a
been a
big
problem.
problem in the first place.
Right.
So, the second step in what I define as simple fixes is to acknowledge that you need help or you need someone's assistance. The
Mm,
third thing, or the third step in this process, is to know that it requires humility,
mhm.
sacrifice on your side. So you have a role to play. That is the third step, that you realize you have a role to play in this process of simple fixes. And we will be applying these to as many
Yeah.
problems that Sister Candace will be asking us today. But the fourth step, I have to say, will be the step of belief. You must believe that the problem can be solved.
Mm,
I believe it was not too long ago when we talked about where is your allegiance, where our body is saying one thing and our minds are doing something else.
join in with
I think
something
I
else.
said that we are trying to learn things that we have rejected already. You
Mhm.
must believe that the solution to the problem, no matter how big it is attainable. That is
Mm.
the fourth step. And if that is attainable, then the fifth step is the step of endurance.
You must.
Some solutions will happen quickly, other
Mm,
solutions will take time.
mm,
Regardless of how long it takes, solutions are time dependent. And Mr.
mm,
Candace, this is powerful because our audience needs to understand that no matter what you are going through, you
mhm.
may have gone through it for 10 years.
Right.
Well, I am here to announce to our audience that this is the time where you get a solution to it. The
Mm,
problems that you have and the solutions that come with them are time dependent. And
mm,
we need to have that understanding
right.
because if we don't have that orientation, Sister Candace, what will happen is that we will try to get the solution for that problem, but because it didn't happen in a short time frame, we let go, we give up, and then end up not getting the solution. How
Mm,
many of us don't know people who have dealt with one problem or another in life, and then they try to solve it? It could be a problem of education, that you have people who may have failed their first exam. They
mm,
did everything they could to try to pass the second exam, but that didn't happen and they gave up. They dropped out of school. They
mm,
tried to go through the various levels of career. We have people like this in our lives,
mm,
that they go through the various steps in their career, hoping that that lifting, that promotion, that pay raise will come, and they do everything that they can. But
mhm.
because it did not come, they did not have that grace to
Right.
endure. And so they quit their careers too soon. Mr.
Right.
Candace, one of the saddest stories I've heard is a young lady who had been with this company for several years, wanting a pay, not a pay raise, but a promotion to a higher position, and uh, the supervisor or the manager at that point in time, after 10 years or so, did not look like he was going anywhere. And this Christian lady kept praying, kept doing the right things, kept doing her work with all diligence. It got to her 10th year that she was fed up, and so she gave up. Guess what? Just after she had left, within 3 months, the manager picked a position somewhere else, and so that managerial position became empty. Guess what? They promoted the one who succeeded her prematurely to
Wow.
that position.
That's gonna hurt.
You left your position too soon. 3 months was all it took.
Wow.
Three
Wow.
months. She sat down before I finished the story. She sat down with the manager to have a conversation, and the manager said, "I had applied for that job that I'm doing now. I had applied a year ago, and I didn't hear back from them until 3 months after you left. And
Wow.
the offer they brought me, I could not refuse. If only you had waited, that
Mhm.
was your position, because everybody in the company knows that you do fit that position." And so, Sister Candace, I say this long story to help our audience understand that endurance is a virtue, and endurance is very different from longevity. We're not talking about longevity here. Longevity has to do with when you are enjoying success, you
Mm,
have the solution, and
mm,
so that has to do with the length of time that you are in that place of rest.
mm.
Whereas endurance has to do with you waiting for that solution. It's
Mm.
very important
Being
for our
patient.
audience to understand. So when I say that simple fixes is a state where we have to be, a state that involves acknowledgement, our need for help, our
Mhm.
sacrifice, or realizing that we have a role to play in coming up with the solution of
Yeah.
everything that we have, and
Mm.
also belief and our endurance or time dependence. So that is what I would define as simple fixes.
That's very powerful. I asked this question because when somebody may think simple fixes means I have a problem, hand me the solution. Like, just bring me the solution. I don't need to do. So I like the part where you said sacrifice. Like you have a part to play. And I think
Absolutely.
many of us are good. We are so good at the first part, which is acknowledgement.
Mm.
Everyone acknowledges when they have a problem. Like, I have a problem. I'm going through this. I'm going through that. But a few people go to the next step, which is needs help. And when some people feel like they need help, they want you to bring it to them. They don't want to do anything. So I feel like that's where the discrepancy comes in. Like, we are able to probably meet the first and the second, but we don't get to go to the other one because it takes a part of us to do them. But then
Absolutely.
how do you have a big problem and you don't want to help yourself get better? So the mindset of today, sometimes I feel like for some of us or our generation, I will say, is we don't want to try hard about certain things.
Mm. Mm.
Even school, like, people literally quit because it's work, not
Yes.
because they are not smart.
Yeah, Sister Candice, and I can actually speak a little bit to the statement that you made, that how can you have a big problem and not want to have help? There are actually things that happen that causes people to not want help. One
Mm,
of the biggest things that we have to deal with, and that ties in into the acknowledgement, is denial. That
mm,
we have a lot of people who will rather live a fake life rather than put in the work to
mm,
actually live a real life. And
mm,
so, obviously, we talk about the advent of social media and how that becomes the platform where you have people snapping pictures on around cars that they don't own, taking pictures in
mm.
offices they don't work in, and
Oh,
things of that nature. These are what we call fake life. But
right.
my question for anyone in such a position is, why fake what can be real?
Mm,
If truly you want to own that car, there is a lifestyle, there is a state that you have to get into for you to be able to have that car. If you truly want to work in that office, that there is something that is causing that discrepancy of
mm,
where your vision is and where your reality is. And that is the thing that we are calling the big problem. It's a gap. The solutions that we are talking about today, the simple fixes, is to help you bridge that gap. And so
mm,
there is no need, really or truly, to fake what can be real in your life. You
right.
can have that office or even a better one if you take the steps, if you go through the simple fixes. You can get there provided it is in your prophetic blueprint,
Mm,
because every one of us have a purpose in this life. I truly believe that. And so if it's not in your purpose, if it's not in your design, then you can wish and want it all you want. My dear audience, even when it's given to you, you're going to hate it. But as long as it's in your prophetic blueprint, as long as it is in your destiny, it's just a matter of time.
right.
There are simple fixes.
And I think, to go back to what you said with why should you fake something that can be real, I think it goes back to one of the aspects of simple fixes, which is belief. Does the person even believe that can be real?
That's true.
you
That's
know
true.
so this is very crucial. This list that you gave is very, very vital for viewers or listeners to apply all of them, maybe not in steps, but apply all of them, because each of them speaks about why you have a big problem,
Correct.
or why the problem is big, I should say.
Yes. Why the problem is big.
But let's go back to the most common issue now in our society, speaking about big problems, which is mental health.
Mm,
People
mm,
going through emotional abuse or abusive relationship, be it domestic violence, be it physical abuse, whatever. I think it would be easy for us to say, get help, just get help.
correct.
But it has not been that easy when we speak about mental problems. It has become the biggest problems of our society. So how do we apply these things to something that is very, it's like, it's hard to even think there is a solution, because you're using your mind to think for solution, but your mind is where the problem is. So can we
Correct.
start from that?
Yeah, absolutely, Sir Candice. And mental health is certainly one of the big problems that is dear to many of our hearts. for one reason or the other. Someone either in our families dealing with it, or we know someone at our workplaces dealing with it, or someone whose family member is dealing with one mental health condition or the other.
Yeah.
So truly, this is a very crucial thing and a very common thing. And Sister Candace, I'm going to say something today that might shock our audience, but I want you to indulge us, dear audience. We will do our very best to give you evidences and proofs for some of these things that we are going to talk about. So, one of the first things I want to talk about is that we have to realize that
Mm.
mental health is not all medical. There
Okay.
is a spiritual component to mental health.
Mm.
Sister Candace, I kid you not, it's almost as though everybody below the age of 20 now
Has.
has some form of autism. It's not all medical. There have been medical conditions or psychiatric conditions that has lingered for years, but there is a spiritual component of it, and I will leave our pastors to do a lot of justice to that and debate it and all that.
Let us
But
know.
when you see something at this scale, it's not an infection, it's not a communicable disease that you will say that someone is transferring to another. It's not something that you learn for you to say that is the system of education that is causing it. This is something that just happens. And I want our audience to understand that because of the nature of a lot of the mental health diseases that we are dealing with, there is a huge spiritual component attached to it.
Mm.
One is an attack on the younger generation. The powers that be, knowing what the agenda of God is for the younger generation, have also sworn to make sure that they will plague them as much as they can. And even if they are not dealing with it personally, that they will make them believe to the
Mhm.
extent that it will affect their ability to even effect change. The
Mm.
younger generation is a very powerful generation because it is the generation that, by all prophetic indications, will get this thing right about God. That
Mm.
there is a lot of imbalances when I know I'm going a little bit off topic, but there's a lot of imbalances when it comes to our representation of God. Our great grandparents in this in the faith saw the holy nature of God, but they ignored the other aspects of God when it comes to his power, when it comes to his wealth, when it comes to his wisdom, because wealth depends on wisdom. So when it comes to those aspects, they ignored it. And then the generation after them found the power component, but they ignored the character that our great fathers found before them. So they found the power component and they were all into the power. They ignored the love, the wisdom, and the character of it, but just dealt with the power. And then we have our current fathers who delved greatly into the wisdom nature of God. I mean, there has not been a time in history where mysteries can be explored when it comes to the wisdom of God like they do. Many men and women are exploring and engaging the mysteries and principles of that God put in place to enrich themselves, to further the kingdom agenda. I'm not saying good or bad. I'm just kind
Mhm.
of stating the facts here. And so finally, it comes to our current and younger generation that this is the generation that has all these three aspects of God at our disposal to be able to use to accurately represent God to
Mm.
the world. And so the crisis that we have mental health wise, may I even dare say that a lot of it is an orchestration to stop this agenda. And so I'm not saying that anyone or everyone who has a mental health issue is under an attack. But I want our audience to have that understanding. I don't want to shortchange our audience and just sit here and talk about all medical aspects, knowing truly by all indications that there is a huge spiritual component to this. But
Yeah.
then we turn our attention to the physical or the medical condition as well. Now, a lot of this really stems from being overwhelmed and being overworked. We have people today, Sister Candace, shouldering responsibilities that they have not matured enough to shoulder. We have people today making decisions for themselves that they have really not enough understanding to be
Mhm.
making, and these are all contributing to the spread or the rampant nature of mental health. So when it comes to mental health, the simple fixes, Sister Candice, start with us acknowledging that it's not all medical, like I said, but
Mm.
also realizing that we have a role as a society, as individuals, as an economic structure, as a
Mm.
country. We have a role to play in the spread or in the rampant nature of mental health. You know,
Wow.
uh, uh,
And I think before you go on, Dr. Joe, I wanted to pitch in here. Ironically, studies shows that majority of people with mental health issues are non-Christians.
correct.
I literally read it from therapy company website, and this is what they stated. And this is like a official website of a company. And so in their whole summary of trying to find you solution, the whole concept is find a religion to connect yourself with or accept Jesus and become a Christian, because that helps their work. It helps them help you to alleviate whatever you're going through. So I just wanted to add that on to that. Studies have proven that mental health has a spiritual components to it.
Thank you very much for that, Sister Candice. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to be able to deduce some of these things, right? Because remember, I said we are overwhelmed. We are shouldering responsibilities that we are not prepared or trained to shoulder, that we are burdened with so many issues. How else are we going to be able to work through some of these issues? Being in relationships, having a community around us, and the church, with all its inadequacies, with all its downfalls, the church is the best place to
Mm,
find people who truly care about you and who truly can love you.
mm,
Every other place where you seek these things has something that they will derive from you. If you depend on your work to be able to do this for you, your work will demand something in turn. The church, Sister Candace, regardless of all the deficiencies and
mm,
all the negativism that has come around the church and the politicization of the church and all that there is, the best people that you can ever find, you will find them in the church. You
true.
can find someone in the business world who will be the best person for you financially. But if you are looking to find someone who will truly embody life with you, someone who will truly be able to do life with you or guide you in life, you will find them in the church. You know why? Because the church will forever be the bride of Christ.
Hmm.
And as the bride of Christ, the church is the most well equipped place to find the representation
Of
of
course.
Christ.
Hmm.
I am not insulting whatever religion that you are a part of, but this is the truth. But this is the truth. And so, Sister Candace, it starts by us acknowledging
Hmm.
that this is not just a medical problem. And
Okay.
then we realize, or we have to get to the point where we realize that we need help, as I just explained, that the church becomes the place where we can get that help. The
Mm,
next step in this simple fix, when we are talking about the mental health crisis, is the humility that we have to develop as a community to say that we got this wrong.
mm,
The community has to acknowledge this. We need to be humble enough to say or to accept that we have gotten this wrong. We have tried and tried and tried. We
so,
have changed policies. We have changed academic curriculums. We have changed work days. We have changed pay schemes and pay grades and all that. But still, this problem of mental health crisis is rising. Why? Because we have gotten it wrong. Let's go back to the basis. The solution starts from us going back to what we are supposed to be in the first place, and that is in a relationship. And relationships, my dear audience, is not dependent on just you and your neighbor, but it also depends on you and your creator. We have gotten this wrong, my audience. For us to fix this problem, we have to go back to the source.
But what I want to add in here, because I'm thinking to myself, a person that is in a mental, problem, let's say, do they have the capacity to even acknowledge?
That is why in my statement I said the community has to realize that we have gotten it wrong, because a lot of these people, Sister Candace, are victims of the things that community has said they are or they are not. A
Okay.
lot of people dealing with mental health crisis. Let's take people with gender dysphoria disorder as an example. A lot of the crisis is because of what we have told them they are when they are not,
Mm.
and that has brought about a conflict on the inside. And so, if you are saying that I am something that I am not, and I come to accept that I am what I am not, that is a conflict of the fabric of my making. This is not a sermon. This is not a church thing. This is our design. Yes, there are medical conditions that can explain certain things in this area. I
Right.
know it's a touchy subject when it comes to the issue of identity and all these things. How about the parent who is insistent on their son or their daughter becoming something they are not?
A
That you
doctor.
are insistent that your daughter becomes a nurse. Meanwhile, this person is an engineer through and through. They can take a whole house apart and put it together in a day without any training or education.
Right, right.
And so we have to realize that we've gotten this wrong. We are
Mhm.
pushing our younger generation and our current generation. It's not just the young people. We have a lot of older people with mental health issues. So, yes, Sister Candice, it's a big problem, like you said, but there is a simple fix.
Right, right.
We have to acknowledge this. We have to accept that responsibility. And then, and only then, are we able to have the belief
Hmm.
that this change can happen.
And I think that creates a disconnection. What we have been doing, or what we have been hearing, be it my generation or the generations behind me, I think there has been a disconnection in, when we find our identity, we don't find it within ourselves. We find it within our surroundings, our
From
community,
what society is telling us we
what
are.
mama said, what dada said, and all these stuff. So that has created that disconnection. When you are not aligned with your internal being, when you are not aligned with that, you are bound to have mental problems. Um, there is a lot more going on around us, and there's a lot more we are hearing and seeing. And I think that's one of the things that probably helped some of the older generation. Certain things were happening in different parts of the world, but they could not see it because social media was in there. But now these same things are happening, but we see it all. A child that's like 10 years old, 15 years old is seeing things that maybe a 50-year-old should be seeing. And it creates, because mentally you have not built, regardless of how people say, oh, I'm mature. Even when I was young, I was acting old, or I have a old people's mindset. Still, your makeup, your biological makeup still has a time to it. So if you're 15 and you're mature, you act old, still doesn't mean your mind can grasp something that a 50-year-old can grasp. And that's where we have placed our generation and the generations behind us. So I don't know if you want to clarify on, and we'll go back into the simple fixes there, and then we'll wrap this up and get into another big problem that we face.
Yeah, Sister Candice, I think you are right when you talk about things around us or people around us But the truth of the matter is that there are things that are defined by our way of life, and there are things that are defined before we even started our life. And so certain things were predefined even before we were born. And we live in a time that everybody wants to change anything in order to fit what they want. And it's not just when it comes to gender issues. I mean, you look at constitutions. You have people who are trying to rewrite constitutions in some countries to favor them because they have somebody they like in power. And so they want to rewrite constitutions to keep them in power. These were things that were not made by the way of our life. No, they were made before we even came to be. And the fact that we have more resources, or we have access, I should say, to more resources than them that came before us, does not mean that we are wiser than them. As a matter of fact, they were able to do a lot more in some instances with the limited resources that they had access to give us the access that we have now to all these vast resources. And those who will come after us will say that we were stupid because there were so many resources and so much access that we did not make much of it. And so this is really my humble cry and plea to our audience that yes, these are big problems, but there is simple fixes. And for the sake of time, I will turn it back to you, Sister Candice, so you can wrap up for us today.
This was a very powerful, and viewers, don't worry, we're gonna get into a part two because there's many big problems, and mental health is, though being one, is a huge problem. So just join us in the part two, because I feel like there is still more you need to hear to find a full solution of a person having a mental problem. Now we have understood that we've been doing it wrong. We need to acknowledge that and know the help that we've been given has not been sufficient. Where else can we turn to? Where else can we look to? And I think if we are open-minded about these things, we'll be shocked where many helps can come from, not just sticking to, excuse me to say, medications all the time, or sticking to yoga all the time. And that's what some people use. So just be open, because there are a lot of things going on in our lives. You'll be surprised. There are simple fixes that we have not just been open to. That's why we don't see it. And so today, of course, Hour of Healing, thought-provoking topic, big problem, simple fixes. I am your host, Candace, Dr. Joe here. Meet us next week for the part two, and see you all next time. God bless you. Bye-bye.